She will never know the money is missing if we hide it in the pumpkin fund. Those are the exact alleged words caught on a secret recording that has the potential to destroy the Roloff family legacy forever. Today, I want to talk about a catastrophic leaked audio tape that is currently circulating in the background of the Little People Big World universe. This is a recording that allegedly proves Matt Roloff and Caryn Chandler were actively plotting to ruin Amy Roloff's financial future years before their highly publicized divorce was even finalized. I have spent a lot of time looking into the timeline of the Roloff separation and the eventual buyout of the farm properties. For years, the public narrative has been that Matt was the visionary who wanted to keep building while Amy was the obstacle who eventually took a payout to leave. But this audio completely changes that narrative. If this tape is exactly what it is, report it to be, we are no longer talking about a bitter marital dispute over shared assets. We are talking about a calculated, coordinated effort to hide massive amounts of marital wealth. My read on this situation is that this audio leak is going to shift the entire conversation from reality television drama into the realm of a serious criminal investigation. To really understand how a conversation like this gets recorded in the first place, you have to understand the golden rule of reality television production. The microphones are always on. A lot of viewers assume that when the cameras stop rolling, the recording stops. That is incredibly inaccurate. Reality television relies on wireless lavalier microphones attached to the cast members. These microphones transmit continuous radio frequencies to a sound mixer who is usually sitting in a van or a production tent hundreds of yards away. The sound engineer does not take their headphones off just because the camera operator puts the lens cap on. In fact, some of the most crucial audio in reality television history has been captured when cast members believed they were having a totally private off-camera moment. During the chaotic rush of pumpkin season on Roloff Farms, the production environment is uniquely stressful. You have thousands of members of the public walking around the property. You have tractors running. You have vendors setting up. The camera crews are constantly scrambling to get B-roll footage of the crowds and the attractions. According to the background of this leak, Matt and Caryn thought they had found a quiet moment away from the lenses to discuss farm logistics. They seemingly completely forgot that their microphone packs were still clipped to their belts and that a sound engineer's receiver was actively recording everything they said. They were having what they believed to be a highly secure private conversation right in the middle of a bustling public event. When you look at the transcript breakdown of this leaked audio, the casual nature of the conversation is what stands out the most to me. They did not just stumble into a vague financial mistake. The recording allegedly captures a chilling and premeditated discussion about skimming cash directly from the farm operating budgets. Specifically, the audio features them detailing how to pull money from unrecorded day labor funds, bulk fertilizer purchases, and diesel fuel budgets. I think it is crucial to break down why these three specific categories were allegedly chosen, because it shows a very high level of business sophistication. Roloff Farms during the month of October is an absolute logistical monster. They hired dozens of temporary workers to manage parking, run cash registers, and supervise the attractions. In the agricultural and seasonal event world, day labor is very often paid in cash or through informal bookkeeping. It is incredibly easy to inflate the projected cost of temporary labor on a spreadsheet. If you claim you need 50 workers for a weekend, but you actually only hire 35, you can easily siphon off the payroll difference into a separate account without raising any immediate red flags. The same principle applies to agricultural supplies. Bulk fertilizer is a massive expense for a working farm of that size. The prices fluctuate wildly depending on the market and the supplier. It is an expense that an outside accountant or a spouse who is not involved in the daily operations would never question. If the farm manager submits an invoice for a certain tonnage of fertilizer, the bookkeeper pays it. The alleged audio suggests that Matt and Caryn were coordinating ways to overstate these agricultural expenses, effectively creating a slush fund out of the excess capital. Then you have the diesel fuel budget. Running tractors for hay rides all day, every day for an entire month, requires thousands of gallons of diesel fuel. Much like fertilizer, fuel is a variable agricultural expense that is very difficult to audit retroactively. You cannot easily prove exactly how many gallons of diesel a specific tractor burned 3 years ago. By padding the projected costs of labor, supplies, and fuel, the operating margins of the farm would appear significantly lower on paper than they actually were in reality. The cash difference was allegedly being funneled directly into this hidden pumpkin fund. This meticulous level of planning completely shatters the defense that Matt simply made some administrative errors during a messy divorce. This was a joint strategy. Caryn was the farm manager at the time. She had intimate knowledge of the daily operations, the vendor relationships, and the cash flow. She was in the perfect position to help execute a scheme like this because she controlled the very logistics they were allegedly manipulating. The fact that they were having this conversation while Amy was still a co-owner of the property and legally entitled to half of the farm profits makes this a massive betrayal. Amy was out there interacting with fans and baking goods for the farm stand, completely unaware that her husband and her farm manager were allegedly conspiring to artificially deflate the value of her business. For a long time, the financial mechanics of the farm buyout seemed unfair but generally legal. Matt presented numbers, Amy eventually agreed to a buyout price, and the property changed hands. But the entire premise of a buyout relies on accurate financial disclosures. If the business was generating hundreds of thousands of dollars in hidden cash that was being diverted into a secret pumpkin fund, then the valuation of the farm was fundamentally fraudulent. Amy accepted a buyout number based on deflated profits. This brings us to the most fascinating element of this entire situation, which is the involvement of Chris Marek. I honestly believe that if Amy had married anyone else, this hidden audio tape might have stayed buried in a production archive forever. But Chris has a long and successful background in real estate. He understands property valuations, business appraisals, and complex financial disclosures. When Chris married Amy, he did not just become a supportive husband. He became an extra set of highly trained eyes looking over the history of the farm transactions. I think viewers often underestimate Chris because he has a very calm and steady demeanor on camera. He is not prone to shouting matches or dramatic reality television confrontations. But behind the scenes, Chris is an analytical thinker. When the tensions over the farm buyout and the subsequent property listings began to escalate, Chris started asking questions that the Roloffs were not used to answering. He started looking closely at the historical spreadsheets, the operating costs, and the revenue projections that Matt had used to justify the buyout numbers. I suspect Chris immediately recognized that the math simply did not make sense for a farm that drew that many paying visitors every single October. According to the leaked narrative surrounding this audio, Chris did not just stop at looking over digital spreadsheets. He realized that the only way to prove that the numbers had been manipulated was to find evidence from the time period when the manipulation was actively happening. This is where the story turns into something out of an investigative thriller. Chris allegedly began tracking down former TLC production staff. The television industry is surprisingly small, especially in the Pacific Northwest where the show is filmed. Camera operators, sound mixers, and production assistants often move from show to show, and many of them do not have lasting loyalty to the networks or the families they film. When you work on a reality show for years, you see and hear everything. The crew knew about the tension between Matt and Amy long before the public did. They also likely knew about the financial power dynamics at play. Reality television contracts are locked down with incredibly strict non-disclosure agreements. Production companies go to great lengths to ensure that raw footage and unedited audio never see the light of day. A crew member leaking an audio file could face severe financial penalties and permanent blacklisting from the industry. But there is a massive legal exception to standard non-disclosure agreements. An NDA cannot be used to cover up a potential crime. If a sound engineer captured audio of two people conspiring to commit financial fraud, that recording is no longer just embarrassing behind-the-scenes gossip. It is potential evidence. I do not know exactly how Chris Marek managed to convince a former staffer to hand over the audio file. It could have been an appeal to their conscience, or it could have been the realization that protecting Matt Roloff was no longer worth the moral compromise. Whatever the method, the result was that Chris allegedly secured the raw audio file of Matt and Caryn discussing the pumpkin fund. Getting the tape was only the first step. What Chris reportedly did next is what elevates this entire situation into completely uncharted territory for the Roloff family. He did not take the audio to the tabloids. He did not use it to secure a more lucrative television contract for Amy. According to the circulating reports, Chris Marek handed this smoking gun audio file directly to the district attorney. That specific decision changes the fundamental reality of the situation. Family court handles messy divorces and hidden assets through civil litigation. If you hide money during a divorce, the judge can penalize you by awarding your ex-spouse a larger share of the visible assets. It is expensive and embarrassing, but it is ultimately just a matter of moving money around to settle a dispute. But taking this evidence to the district attorney takes the issue completely out of the realm of family court. We are now talking about the potential for a massive federal criminal investigation. When you intentionally manipulate business expenses, file inaccurate tax returns based on those manipulated expenses, and use the Postal Service or electronic banking to move those funds, you are crossing into the territory of tax evasion and wire fraud. The federal government does not care about reality television drama. They care about accurate tax revenue and the lawful operation of businesses. If the district attorney reviews this tape and determines that Matt and Caryn engaged in a coordinated effort to defraud Amy, and by extension the tax authorities, the consequences will be severe. I want to pause here because I think it is very necessary to look at the other side of this coin. As an outside observer analyzing this leaked narrative, I have to acknowledge the possibility that there might be a different explanation. I always try to look for the most charitable interpretation of an event before drawing a final conclusion. What if the phrase pumpkin fund does not mean what it sounds like? In agricultural businesses, it is very common to have capital expenditure accounts reserved for specific seasonal needs. You might have an account dedicated entirely to purchasing seeds, repairing visitor attractions, and securing permits for the following October. It is entirely possible that the Pumpkin Fund was a legitimate internal account used to manage the cash flow of the fall festival. If Matt and Caryn were discussing moving money into that fund, they could theoretically argue that they were simply managing the operating budget, not hiding personal wealth from Amy. Furthermore, we have to consider the context of reality television editing and the potential for fragmented audio. Is it possible that this quote was spliced together from different parts of a much longer, completely innocent conversation? We know that production companies have the technology to manipulate audio to create storylines. While this audio allegedly comes from raw files rather than a broadcast episode, the possibility of the conversation being taken out of context still exists. We also have to question the motivations of the person who leaked it. If the audio came from a disgruntled former employee who was fired by Matt, they might have intentionally provided a clip that sounds incredibly damning, but is actually harmless when heard in full. I also have some genuine questions about the timeline of the legal process. The reports claim that the tape has been handed over to the district attorney, but federal and state financial investigations move incredibly slowly. White-collar financial crimes require forensic accounting. Investigators would have to subpoena the farm bank records from years ago, audit the fertilizer and diesel invoices, and track every single cash deposit made during those specific pumpkin seasons. Has the district attorney actually opened a formal grand jury investigation? Or was the tape simply submitted to their office as a civilian complaint? Anyone can hand a piece of evidence to law enforcement, but that does not guarantee that law enforcement will dedicate the massive resources required to prosecute a complex financial case. I do not have enough information to say for sure where the legal proceedings currently stand. Despite these valid counter-arguments, my personal read on the situation remains highly skeptical of Matt and Caryn. The specific language reportedly used in the recording is very difficult to explain away. Saying she will never know the money is missing strongly implies an intent to deceive. You do not use that kind of phrasing if you are simply transferring funds into a standard business checking account. That phrasing implies that there is a victim who is being deliberately kept in the dark. I also look at the broader pattern of behavior surrounding the farm buyout. Matt was consistently resistant to allowing Amy full transparency into the farm operations during the latter years of their marriage. He frequently complained on camera about her lack of business sense, using that as a justification for why he needed to control the finances. That dynamic creates the exact kind of environment where financial manipulation can occur. When one partner holds all the logistical knowledge and actively discourages the other partner from looking at the books, it is very easy to hide assets. If this audio belongs in a courtroom, it means that the entire legacy of Little People Big World has been built on a foundation of financial deception. The show was originally pitched as a wholesome documentation of a unique family overcoming challenges to build a beautiful life together. The farm was the ultimate symbol of that shared dream. It was supposed to be a legacy property that would eventually be passed down to the children. Instead, the farm became a battleground, and it now appears it may have also been the scene of a calculated financial crime. Matt and Caryn are essentially trapped by the existence of their own words. Even if the district attorney ultimately decides that the case is too old or too difficult to prosecute criminally, the moral and reputational damage is already done. You cannot unhear a recording like this. The fans who have watched this family for over a decade will never be able to look at the Pumpkin Festival the same way again. Every time Matt posts a video showing off a new tractor or talking about the success of the fall season, the audience is going to be wondering exactly how that equipment was paid for. Amy Roloff spent years questioning her own reality during the divorce. She was frequently painted by Matt and sometimes by the show's editing as bitter, paranoid, and unwilling to let go of the past. She repeatedly expressed feelings that things were happening behind her back, but she struggled to find the hard evidence to prove it. This tape, if verified, is the ultimate vindication for her. It proves that she was not paranoid. She was highly perceptive. She was absolutely right to trust her instincts that she was being pushed out of her own creation unfairly. I find the involvement of Chris Marek in this narrative to be the most satisfying part of the story. For years, the Roloff men seemed to dominate the strategic decisions of the family. Matt controlled the farm, and the sons were largely caught in the middle of their parents' disputes. Chris came into the family without any of that historical baggage. He looked at the situation objectively, recognized the discrepancies, and quietly did the work required to uncover the truth. He did not need to scream on camera to protect his wife. He just needed to find the one piece of evidence that Matt could not talk his way out of. The idea that a stray microphone from a reality television sound mixer could be the thing that ultimately brings down Matt Roloff's carefully constructed empire is incredibly ironic. For nearly 2 decades, Matt used the television cameras to build his wealth, promote his business, and craft his public image as the hard-working, visionary patriarch. He invited the production crews onto his property because he wanted the world to see his creations. But in doing so, he surrendered his privacy. He brought the very surveillance tools onto his farm that would eventually capture his alleged conspiracy. This situation forces us to reevaluate everything we thought we knew about the final seasons of the show. When Caryn was comforting Matt about the stress of the farm negotiations, were they both secretly aware of the pumpkin fund? When Matt was publicly offering to sell portions of the farm to his children at what he claimed was a fair price, were those prices based on manipulated accounting? The existence of this tape casts a shadow over every single financial decision made on that farm over the last 10 years. I think the coming months are going to be critical. If law enforcement acts on this evidence, we will likely see subpoenas issued for the farm financial records. We might see former employees forced to testify about their knowledge of the cash handling procedures during pumpkin season. The reality television facade will completely fall away, replaced by the very serious machinery of the legal system. It is a tragic end to what was once a highly respected television legacy. The farm that brought the family together has ultimately become the exact thing that tore them apart. And this hot mic disaster might just be the final chapter of that story.